Hey, what is going on? This is Jake Hofer, and welcome back to another episode of Back 40. We have 4 guests, 1 question, and this week we're talking about what are the most affordable habitat projects that actually work. So we can come up with a million different things that you could potentially do, but the 80-20 rule, what is the 20% effort that may help you have 80% more success? And they have to be affordable. So I hope this helps folks throughout this upcoming season on planning out priority list. A lot of these things are expensive, and so we wanted to focus on what is affordable and what is impactful. Once again, we have our cast of 4 guests for this episode. We have Wes Delks, Steve Hansen, Jake Ellinger, and Sam Billhorn. Each of them have a little bit different habitat terrain, a little different issues they're trying to solve or overcome. And to kick things off, we're going to start with Wes Delks with Higgins Outdoors. He consults on a lot of farms every single year, and here we go. All right, Wes, welcome back to Back 40. We have another burning question for you. And, I feel like when it comes to managing a property, it gets really expensive really fast. There's all these things that you can do. And we previously talked about what to avoid at all costs. But now, let's say someone has a fixed budget. They've stretched to get whatever hands on a piece of property, whether it's a lease, they knocked on doors and, have exclusive permission, or they bought a farm. And ultimately, in your opinion, what are some of the most affordable projects that actually make the biggest impact? Because I could rattle off some cheap projects, but I don't know how much they'll really make a true impact. So with your own experience, what you've observed from even clients that farms you've been on, and like, man, that was a very affordable project. And, they have the opportunity to show you the success that they've had tied to that. So what is cheap and what works is the simplest way to say this.
Yeah, cheap is relative, but I can tell you what's effective. And I would say encouraging and discouraging deer traffic is something that 99% of hunters are not doing, but makes an incredible difference in their deer hunting. And I talk with so many hunters that I would consider conservative hunters. And they're sticking to the edge, they're blowing their wind into areas of lesser deer likelihood. But when it comes to November, they are banging their head against the tree because they're seeing deer, they're seeing the bucks that they want to, but they're 80, 90, 100 plus yards out. And encouraging and discouraging deer traffic, it to me, is the number one thing that a deer hunter can do to improve the huntability of the properties that they're on. And it doesn't have to be expensive. It takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of sweat equity. But champions are made in the off season. I don't care what sports you follow. If you watch NFL, NBA, March Madness, they didn't win that championship the week that they showed up. It came through a year or even a life of committing to their process. And champions are made in the off season. And if you're showing up to November hoping to kill a big buck each year, but haven't put in the off season efforts to make that possibility a reality, like I said, it's a recipe for frustration. And what I mean by encouraging and discouraging deer traffic is encouraging deer traffic, to me, is making the path of least resistance by any and all means possible for the deer. Selecting a stand location based on access and wind, and then doing everything that I can to make a deer walk within 25 yards. I like them close. I don't want them at 40. I want them at 20, 25 yards. And so I will encourage deer traffic where I want it. And that might be using a chainsaw and cutting a trail and then coming back through with a backpack sprayer full of Roundup and a residual. That might be creating a creek crossing, getting in there with a skid steer and excavator, grading the banks, maybe bringing in some rock and making that creek crossing a shallower crossing. You can do a lot of things to encourage deer traffic. Put in a big culvert across the ravine and create a land bridge. Those are all opportunities of making the path of least resistance. But what I find is I would argue, even more effective is discouraging deer traffic. And discouraging deer traffic is the exact opposite of what I just talked about. Is I want to create the path of least resistance for the deer, but I also want to create the path of most resistance for the deer. And that means building brush blockades. To me, what a brush blockade is Donald Trump and I are on the same page when it comes to walls. And I like good, strong walls. And what I will do with a timber project or along a edge is cut some low-value trees, push them together with a skid steer and a grapple, and then hinge cut into it. And I'm not talking about a brush pile that's knee high. I'm talking about a brush wall, a brush blockade. And that funnels a lot of deer traffic. So brush blockades, lining up round bales. A lot of people think round bales are expensive. One thing that I've done is my warm season grasses. So I've got switchgrass and giant miscanthus fields across my property that I want to burn every 3 or 4 years. And there's a kid that lives down the road from my house, and he's got a round baler. And the week prior to the burn, I will come in and have him cut and round bale my switchgrass and giant miscanthus to where it's 8-10 inch stubble. It's where it can still carry a fire. But last time we did that here on my 17 acre switchgrass giant miscanthus patch, that gave me 123 5-foot round bales. So
oh my gosh,
123 times 5, that's a significant distance of discouraging deer traffic. You line up 123 round bales, you're going to have a deer trail on either side. Like, that's the reality of it. Other opportunities would be on a property a couple years ago, I dug you can call it a pond, you can call it a water hole, you can call it a trench, whatever you want to call it. I got in there with an excavator and 150 yards long, call it a water hole. And so 150 yards on the edge of a food plot, this water hole that is about 4 foot deep and probably 10 to 12 foot wide. A lot of traffic going around the two ends of that water hole. Think of another guy.
How long? Real quick, how long do you think those round bales will last? The warm season grass?
Yeah, good question.
I imagine it lasts quite some time.
Yeah, I've got a buddy that did it 16 years ago, and with those 5-foot round bales, the wind and the weather has significantly brought those round bales down to probably maybe not half their height, but significantly smaller. They've absolutely degraded, but there's been little trees that grow up in them. And yeah, there's some places where they can get through, but you can go through there and put a small cattle panel or something like that, and the vast majority of traffic is still going around the end of that. So, and it depends on the quality of the bale that you're using. I mean, you want to use good binding material, and the hay that you're using is, I think, switchgrass and giant miscanthus is, it's a lot. It's going to take longer for it to break down than a low quality hay. So, but yeah, for seeing it on my buddy's property that 16 years later, it's still effective. That's long enough for me to be like, yeah, that's worth my time. So.
Yeah, that's pretty fascinating. Yeah, that's a creative and affordable way to cover a lot of distance versus. Because I was waiting for you to say fence. I was like, well, fence isn't super cheap, but it does last for a super long time.
Well, fences is not cheap, but you can go to Rural King, and they sell cattle panels. Hog panels are a foot shorter. Cattle panels are a foot taller, and they come in 16-foot sections. And they're normally about $25 a pop. If you buy 10 cattle panels, so you're looking at $250, and you line up 10 cattle panels, I mean, if you can make the $250 investment, and it's amazing what you can do with 10 cattle panels.
Yeah. I mean, that's, you said they're 16 foot long?
Yep.
So 160 feet?
Right.
I mean, Yeah, I mean, that is actually
That adds up.
relatively affordable, yeah, to cover that much distance and
Yep.
super easy to install
Yep.
as well.
It is.
You were gonna bring up someone else for an example, and then we'll
Yeah.
wrap it up here.
Just a client that comes to mind whenever somebody asks me about encouraging, discouraging traffic is always brings a smile to my face. Is he owned a junkyard, so there was school buses and RVs and old trucks and
Gotcha.
cars around, and I pitched this idea of things that we could do on his property to make it better. And I had these green lines where I wanted to encourage deer traffic, and I had these red lines where I wanted to discourage deer traffic. And he goes, well, how about a school bus there? I was like, yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, some people make excuses and some people find solutions. That's a Don Higgins quote, one of my favorites.
Yeah.
And if you can do what it takes to manipulate deer traffic past those most conservative locations, you're going to have a lot more success.
Yeah, well, I love it. Where can people follow along with what you have going on? Because I think these are all really great pieces of advice, and I feel like someone could have a general idea, and maybe they have a follow up question for you.
Yeah.
Because everyone's situation is a little bit different.
Yeah, I suggest listen to the Chasing Giants podcast with Don Higgins and Terry Peer, or you can follow me on social media on Facebook or Instagram, which is just Wesley Delks, or you can reach out to me via email, which is Wes, W-E-S, at realworldwildlifeproducts.com, and I'd love to talk with you there.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Jake.
All right, there we have it with Wes Delks. Next up, we have Steve Hansen in Iowa. He helps a lot of different people from his real estate career of helping those types of clients, and also tackles a lot of projects on his own. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get into it with Steve Hansen. All right, Steve, welcome to Back 40. Back to run you through another scenario that I think everyone has fallen into at some point, whether they're just getting started or as life evolves. You know, budgets have to get allocated differently. And in your opinion, of all the different projects that can be done on a farm, obviously there's huge overhauls that are often, pretty expensive. What is potentially one of the most affordable habitat projects that actually makes the best ROI? So, I mean, we could rattle off a lot of, cheap projects that maybe might not move the needle a ton. But as a rule of thumb, for someone that has a limited budget, limited equipment, what gets you excited if I called you up and said, hey, Steve, I have a limited budget. I need to improve my farm. And I'll let you paint the rest of the picture because I know every farm's different.
Yeah, it's a toss up between two for me right now. The two I'm thinking of is fertilizing the native vegetation that's there, whether that's prairie grass and stuff. But the one I'm going to go with is burning. I think burning is by far the most cost effective, do it yourself landowner type, you know, reasonable landowner do
Yeah.
it yourself project that simply you could do with, a backpack water sprayer, a leaf blower, maybe a mower or something like that to create, even a lawnmower to create some fire breaks, depending on, and it works both equally as well in the timber as it does in the CRP. And I think you'll note, or any native grasslands, and you'll notice big benefits with both. So the reason I chose that one is because not only is that one going to provide way better forage in the areas that you burn, it's actually ecologically better for everything. It takes care of invasives, it rejuvenates the forest, it helps on so many levels in addition to the hunting. Where fertilizing native vegetation, that was more of that would help your hunting. You know what I mean? That
Yeah.
was almost like creating micro food plots in little areas like that. But I think overall burning is probably the one that is lowest cost. And by saying low cost, it's only low cost if you're able to do it yourself. You start having a higher burning done, that gets pretty expensive and pretty cumbersome. So a lot of states offer burn training seminars. And then some states, I know Missouri does, they sort of have a cooperative where you can burn and you're expected to show up on X amount of work days. And in return, the collective or the group will show up and burn yours. So yeah, so and then they have like small trailers with all the equipment. So I don't know if you pay a fee to join this thing. I know there may be something. I don't think it's expensive, but that's a great way, especially for a landowner that has quite a few acres, where they don't have any buddies that they could trust or a local fire department or something like that. Obviously, there's some safety concerns to doing it, but it of all the native vegetation, everything in our part of the Midwest, it benefits from fire done correctly. So that's going to be the one that I'll go with.
Yeah, I mean that's in terms of high impact, low cost. It doesn't get much more affordable than a drip torch and a little gas and a little diesel
Yes.
and a leaf
Yep.
blower. Like a lot of equipment you likely already have, and then
Yep.
also too, um, to your point, like local volunteer fire departments. Maybe we'll if you can work with them and have a training day, depending on
Right.
the terrain and um, do you think this is a loaded question. Do you think that people are too intimidated by fire? And I know that is like it's a fine line because I think a lot of people are maybe over concerned, and then I don't want to downplay it either by phrasing it that way. But I want to get your opinion.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are intimidated by it, and somewhat rightly so, because done incorrectly, I mean, the results could literally be catastrophic. But
Yep.
but it's also very easy to manage. Um, the biggest mistakes that I see people make, and it's is simply a timing issue. They 2 months out they plan. Oh, we're going to burn March 10th. I've got these buddies coming. I got these guys coming. Well, they get up the morning of March 10th, and it's a northwest wind blowing about 25 miles an hour, humidity down around 25%. They have no business burning, but they've set the stage to do it, so they go ahead with their burn, and it inevitably gets away. So um that's that would be what I would avoid, is trying to get trying to be flexible on the days, because on the right day with light wind and moderate humidity and burning, what's a back burn, meaning burning against the direction of the prevailing wind, um it's very safe and very controlled.
Hmm. Have you ever done like like a fall burn or a late summer burn or anything like that? I think Dr. Craig Harper has some data saying, like don't quote me, and so I haven't researched this heavily at all, but in essence, I think some time of an August burn actually, if the timing is right with the rain, it actually produces some like very very extreme high quality forage if you get the rain in that August timeframe. Have you ever experimented with that?
I've not done an August burn. I have done quite a few fall burns. Usually we do them later. We're doing them in, like, they're still a dormant season burn. They're going to be after a heavy frost freeze, like late November. I know we burned 100 acres at the end of November last year, and it went really, really well. I'm glad we did it. And we've got at least three that we didn't get done this spring, that now will get pushed back. The other advantage is, you're doing a fall burn, you're going to benefit the forbs in your mix. It's going to help them. Basically, a spring burn helps the grasses, hurts the forbs. A fall burn suppresses the grasses, helps, so it's kind of what your intentions are. So
Well, no, I think that. Do you have any bad fire stories, real quick, of what not to do? For someone's like, okay, all right, Steve, you said this is the highest impact. I feel semi confident. Uh, Maybe do you have like whatever you do, don't do this. You mentioned the right conditions is key.
yep.
But beyond that,
Yeah, this one would play into the right conditions. So I have a good real estate client and friend, and we helped him add to his already big farm. Bought a 550-acre tract, and he said, "Hey, would you guys help me burn that?" So I said, "Sure." And he's got all his own farm equipment and everything. So he went and did his fire breaks. He had a big disc, so I thought, "Oh, he disced these fire breaks." Mistake number one: did not check them, assumed the fire breaks in his mind were done. Well, when you go in heavy grass with a disc, the first pass or two would actually make it worse, because it condenses that grass and fuel low to the ground, which will allow the fire to travel faster. So we get there, we're always busy, so we're in a hurry. We assume he had his fire breaks, and we lit it. It's windier than it should be anyways, but it's a bit he has a big farm. One side of this was a river. So that part of it, I was somewhat comfortable with the what if it got away because it was limited to his land on the side we were burning and the river. So we light it, instantly crosses the fire breaks. I have a friend that was lighting for me, and I was usually one person lights and one person goes behind and stops it at the fire break from burning into your brakes. I can't even catch him or get him on the phone to tell him to stop burning, right? So the fire's out of control instantly. The first little, and it was later in the burn season, so there's a lot of smoke. First time we get a good wind and the smoke blows away, blows out a different direction, I go, there's a truck parked out there in the burn. And so I call the landowner and I said, there's a truck out there. He's like, no, there's not. And I said, yeah, there is. I can see it through the smoke. He goes, oh no, that's a 500-gallon fuel tank. We had it down there for the dozer. So left in the middle of the burn, never told us. Again, my mistake for not investigating what we were doing. Just that, yeah, that one was a near miss. So we instantly didn't even worry about fighting the fire. All we did was worry about protecting that fuel tank. So then
Yeah.
we just had to let it burn to wherever it went and chase it down. And it ended up getting on a neighbor, not really doing any damage. But I felt bad that one of their neighbors were obviously hunters. And I literally called the guy because it burned right under some of his stands. And I said, hey, don't climb into those stands. It could have burned the straps. You know what I mean? I said, any damage we did, we'll certainly cover for you. Another funny story is, again, helping a friend, another friend / real estate client. He's burning at his pace. He had good fire breaks and is a very, very knowledgeable guy. But we burned some switchgrass that was every bit of 8 feet tall. And there was 3 of us doing it, and we were burning hundreds of acres on his place that day. We got it so hot that I think it was I'm trying to think of the brand of the shooting house. It was a Grizzly, like one of those rotomolded plastic. It got so hot it just started to blow a big bubble in the plastic. And his wife came up and she was just screaming at me, and I'm like, it's him, it's not me. She's like, well, I'm done with him. He's I'm like, so she was super mad. And he was laughing about it. So I didn't, I'm like, yeah, that sucks. We ruined your blind. But I said, you should have mowed around your blind instead of burning. He had a perfect setup, like super tall switchgrass as a screen to access his hut. That
Yeah.
should have been mowed flat to the ground so it wasn't a flash type fuel source. But yeah, I do have more stories, unfortunately, but those two will
I can imagine.
probably,
Yeah, we'll have to do.
you get the
we'll have to
idea.
do a horror story of burning before burning season next year. But the reason I asked that is because there's a couple lessons in that. It's obviously high fuel loads around the blinds and stuff. Take the time to do that, and also just the preparation, makes it go
Yes.
smooth and not stressful. Because if it gets out of hand, it gets really stressful really fast. And
It
obviously you
can
don't want
be.
that.
Yep, we started doing burns for another company that did habitat work, and they lost their insurance because they had one get away, and they literally put it out as it was burning the siding on these people's house.
Oh my gosh.
Yes. And yeah, so their insurance dropped them. They do have their insurance back now. They're doing their own again, but it's I think that was pretty scary, and it's something you have to respect. You want enough fear to keep you honest a little bit. You know what I mean? But you don't need to be just panic afraid of it. And if someone's never done it, I think if you can find a group like that or volunteer and just be involved in one burn, that would go, worlds of. It would make, if I'd never done it, and after seeing the process, you'd be a lot more comfortable with it.
Yeah. Well, Steve, where can people follow along with your adventures?
Probably the best place is just on Instagram. It's just my name, Steve Hansen III. And we put what we're doing on there, good, bad, or otherwise.
Awesome. Thank you. All right, moving right along, we have Jake Ellinger with Habitat Solutions 360 out of Michigan. He was on the Wired to Hunt show here not too long ago talking about his 50 years of experience. And let's see what Jake has to say regarding this question. All right, Jake, welcome back. I feel, and I don't want to project to anyone, but I feel like everyone's watching their pennies a little bit closer. And unfortunately, oftentimes habitat projects can carry some substantial cost when you start adding up everything that you can do on a property. And so I want to refine this to some of the most affordable projects that make the biggest impact. Because obviously, you can do a lot of projects that aren't very expensive, but how much do they move the needle? So I want to focus on the cheapest, highest impact projects that anyone can do.
Yeah, that's a good question because boy, you go back 45 years ago, and I was that guy. I had limited resources. Okay, and so
Everyone starts that way, I feel. Yeah.
oh, I think you're right, Jake. Um, for me, it was simple timber stand improvements I could do with a half a dozen tanks of gas and a quart of oil, bar oil for my chainsaw. Okay, and what I could do in 2 days and a weekend with a chainsaw makes a huge impact of long term. Everything from bedding to security to screening, whatever I'm trying to accomplish, and that would be for anybody that's got some existing timber growth of some age class, something that's 10 to 12 feet and taller. There's always things you can do. You can create side cover, you can create natural deer movement trails, you can create barriers because hey, the deer are always coming out on this corner. I want to stop them from there's and then very detailed timber stand work. Creating large bedding areas and transition zones and that sort of stuff. So that's one that pretty big impact for a small amount of cost.
What's another one or two? Because I know when I developed this question, I knew TSI was going to be probably the ringing answer for everyone because it is affordable and it is impactful, especially if you have a game plan and know what you're doing. But what are some other things that maybe on your own property or consultations to where it's like, man, this might cost you $100, $50, $20, just your time. What are some other things that people can do?
I've got one that I've used for decades, and now it's very popular, and a lot of people are doing it different ways, different methods. But mock scrapes. I've got one location right now that I've had. I have a camera there, and I call it the Pines Turnaround because it was a place I had pines planted, and due to die off and other things, I made this little area where I could back my pickup in there and turn around. Okay, and it's right between some nestled and some pines. So 30 years ago, I started mock scrapes there, and to this day, it's where I can get pictures of every good antlered buck in this section. I can get him right there, and they're always there. And what's that take? Literally, it takes 10 minutes of my time and 75 cents worth of paracord or wire. And that's all it takes. And I just, I cut new vines every late August and put new vines in and reuse the wire that's been there. So it's hard to calculate what my expense is, just my time. And I do that in multiple locations. But boy, it can have some long-term effect in how the does communicate to the bucks and the bucks communicate to one another. And, over time and hierarchy, it becomes the place that everybody uses their nose to figure out, what everybody else is doing in the deer herd.
And so you're a vine guy because to your point, there's a lot of different ways people use mock scrapes, and everyone, I do think it's one of those things where there's a lot of different ways that you can do it and have success. But you're in Michigan, and so you're cutting just a vine that you find, sometime in the summer or like it's a simple process, but I want you to walk through how you do that. Do you cut it and you have a stockpile of vines behind your house, or is it you go cut a fresh one? What's your strategy?
Yeah, that's a good question. And number one, we have a lot of wild grape. Okay, it's just everywhere. Birds, eat the fruit, and the seeds are anywhere there's a brush pile or a fence row. There's wild grape, and in the woods, they're climbing up all the trees, the oaks, the cherries. So there's a lot of them, and some are real big. They're as big as my wrist, and other ones are the size of my thumb or my forefinger. And that's the size I look for. Okay. But what I do, I cut them the day I'm going to hang them. I want them fresh and dripping water the day I replace them because they do dry out over season. And that's what happens. The ones that I put up last year, say right around Labor Day weekend, that's how long they've been there. And some of those vines have been broken off this winter while the buck still had antlers because they were still in there banging their heads on them and leaving scent. And so because they're dry, they snap them off and break them off. Okay. So my process is literally, I know where I want to put it. I've got wire or parachute cord with me and a pair of clippers. I know where to look for the living vines. Okay. So I just literally go up there with I've got a side by side and it's electric and, cut it. And I cut way more than I need. If I only need 5 feet of vine, I might cut 15 feet, kind of roll it up and put it in the back. And it's going to be, thumb size to, like I said, forefinger in size. And it's just what I found on my farm, what they like. I've tried the bigger ones. I've tried little, smaller ones. This is the size they like. And if I can find one that's got a Y on it, it splits, that's like the ideal because I'll trim about a foot of those splits off. And that will be the end that they work on. So it gives them 2 licking branches to put their mouth on and chew on and rub into their preorbital glands and that type of thing. But anyways, when I get to where I want to put it, I've either a brand new vine, I see a tree limb. Most of the time I use an existing tree limb and, cut the vine way longer than I need it and wire it up and make sure it's hanging down somewhere between about chest and belly button height off of the ground. And I've just found that when, vines are flexible. So when you're using, say, you go back 20 years ago, 30 years ago, when I was more using licking branches that I was pulling down from existing living trees, those work really, really good. And they use it for the same reason. But I found the vines, they spend more time in, they wind up those vines under their neck and across their antlers. And the pictures I've gotten over the years, almost hilarious to see what some of these 2 and 3 year olds end up with that vine all tangled up in their antlers and it kind of mesmerizes them, I think, in a way. They mess with them. I spend a lot of time. But it's real, it's real easy. And I'm not going to say there's any right or wrong way, but it needs to be in a fairly level location where deer can see it as they approach it, scent check it as they approach it. And it works really good in cover. Edges of food plots works real good too. Maybe you've got a main trail where they're coming from a transition zone or a bedding area where they enter the food plot. Well, maybe you're lucky enough to have, a cherry tree or an oak tree or a hickory tree growing right there. And you can tie that vine and have that vine right there hanging out maybe in the first foot or 2 of that food plot. So the moment they leave cover, there's something they can communicate with. And, I'm guessing I got 40, 50 of them that I set up on this farm every year.
That's a ton.
It's a bunch.
That's a lot.
But I'll tell you, because everyone.
I was going to ask you. I was just going to ask you where what's one of the key locations to put it. But it sounds like for you, it's everywhere. That's a ton.
Yeah. I have some great rut stands, and I've created, travel corridors and things like that through TSI work. And I've got, on my right, 15 yards away, and on my left, 15 yards away, I've got vines. And during the rut, it's just a blast to watch all these deer, running through the woods, pretty good clip, and they stop, work that vine for 15 seconds, go again, They got to leave their scent. Yep.
Yeah. Well, that's, I think that's a great, impactful project that anyone can do really anywhere, no matter where they're at, and put a camera on there and observe it. Well, let me ask you this question: with that many different mock scrapes that you have on your farm, do you see them? I mean, when you, like, for example, when you had the one at 15 yards to your right and to your left, would they hit both of them, or would they just pick one that was closest? Or like, what have you seen from a behavioral standpoint?
I'm glad you asked that, because it seems like the younger bucks will spend the time and hit both of them. But when you start getting into that 3-4 year old mature deer, that's pretty, he's got one that he singles out, and he'll go hit that one, or he'll just come in and just kind of scent check. He'll be 3 to 5 yards from it, kind of put his nose down near the scrape underneath it, and just kind of slow down a little bit, see what's going on, never even stop. But the other one, he won't even pay any attention to. So, yeah, I think, individually, they've got their own preferences.
Okay. Well, now, Jake, where can people follow along with what you have going on if they want to watch some of your content that you produced over the years?
Yeah, the best is my YouTube channel, Habitat Solutions 360 LLC. And I'm also on Facebook under my name, Jake Illinger, and then also Habitat Solutions 360.
All right, to wrap this up, we have Sam Billhorn with Whitetail Partners out of Wisconsin. Let's see what he has to say about this. All right, Sam, welcome back to another episode of Back 40. Last time we talked about the mistakes to avoid at all cost, and now we're diving into affordable projects that make a true difference and impact. I understand so many properties different. Every hole in the bucket for each property is a little bit different that needs to get patched up. But the purpose of this question and thought process is simply, I have a limited budget. Thank goodness I have a place to do some of these projects. What can I do that isn't going to break the bank? And I'm also going to see a reward for my work, because I feel when that loop is not tied together, it's tied to frustration. So we're going to try to save some folks some frustration.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me again, Jake. And this will be a great balance to the last clip that we did in terms of talking about the other end of the spectrum. In our first meeting, we talked about the bigger picture and trying to, have budget and tackle those larger items and the enjoyment that comes from it. But on the other hand, there's a ton of things we can do to help make meaningful impact to our properties. And I'll go, on that, I talk big picture. I'll go to some details here, especially for those guys out there trying to work hard to use their labor and their muscle to improve their property. And God bless them for doing it. That's some real work, but real enjoyment too. So a few things. My mind always goes to the timber. I look at it and say, we give a lot of press. The industry talks a ton about food plots. There's all kinds of products and equipment and all these things for food plots. If you scroll through your social media feed, what do you see? It's food plot pictures and this and that all summer long. And that's a marketable thing. It sells. People want to buy and buy their equipment and their food plot seed and enjoy doing those plots, and that's all good. However, I think if you're trying to kill bigger bucks and have those opportunities on them, those opportunities 9 times out of 10 are going to be in your cover, and specifically, I'll say in your timber. Now, with that, what can a guy do? So I am constantly preaching on client properties, and I still make the joke that I can probably count on one hand, even though I've been on hundreds of properties now, that there's only a few people that I said, you're probably done cutting now. You've cut enough that I think we're good for a bit, and we can just go into seeing how this rebounds and develops. So let's talk about what that cutting means. I say it generically, and people hear it, but there's a number of things you can do. First of all, if you got a big mature timber, maybe there's some value there. You can get a harvest done. You can get some logs out. You can make a buck. You can get some money back from that investment that you're having. That's all well and good, and there's a place for that in the habitat planning that we do. Oftentimes, we'll make a recommendation for that. Beyond that, or next, I would say this is kind of in the order of operations too, is looking at larger timber TSI. So maybe it's bringing down some of those bigger trees. Maybe they are not this saleable timber that we're going to be after. We just need to get them down for a number of reasons. We can go into all the TSI stuff. We could probably talk for an hour on that. But getting bigger trees on the ground, opening up that canopy, and now we're starting to get into some of the keys of habitat development and quality deer cover, getting sunlight down, increasing that forage and also ground structure. I don't think ground structure gets talked about enough.
I
that
agree.
Real side cover of, man, when you go out there and you knock down, let's just take a 5-acre area. You go down and you go in there and you knock down 15 or 20 big trees, you have changed the landscape on the ground. And it doesn't take a lot of work. I know it's important to mention safety and doing things that you're comfortable with. If you're new to this, working your way up to larger trees and understanding some of those things. But, getting those bigger trees down and then start to get into the finer work of, okay, smaller trees. Now we're still with TSI mindset, looking for our future quality trees that we want to have, either for forage or for timber value, and then all those things that we want to keep in balance. But increasing that cover, increasing that forage. Sometimes now we're talking about utilizing other things like hinge cuts and getting into bedding areas. So targeting specific areas to put trees down for habitat. Could be the developing cover for bedding, could just be staging areas. And then again, strategically starting to think towards deer movement. Now we're getting into corridors, trying to manipulate that movement across the landscape. If you have a wide open timber that has, it's very mature and very open, number one, deer don't want to be there in general, especially big bucks, but they can move freely. They can go wherever they want. There's very few trails that have been developed unless the topography is dictating it. And you don't have really this, what I would call organized deer activity. If you do that and you start developing corridors and restricting the paths that they can go on, you're going to allow yourself opportunities then to insert where you can hunt. And that's where all of this comes together in the planning and thought process to develop a property. But again, getting back to your question is, what can a guy do? All this stuff is about really labor. It's simple, hard work.
Chainsaw oil and gas.
Yeah, you got it. So this is like getting out there and you'll learn so much about your timber as you start to, you'll get to know every tree by name in a way that you know your landscape, you know the details of it. And if you do this over the course of a few seasons, you'll see how deer are using it. One of the things that taught me the most about habitat and how deer are using the timber is being in it in all seasons, manipulating it, dropping trees, and really seeing how deer react to what I'm doing. And getting back to the core here is, what can a guy do is put that labor in the timber and make sure you're developing your quality entry points and hunting locations along the way to intercept those deer in those locations that between your timber cutting, your access points, and the topography of the landscape, that you're going to have really effective places to hunt.
And I think another cheap and free thing would be find someone that knows more about this than you too. If you're brand new to this and this sounds very overwhelming, just, hey, can I walk your timber with you sometime and take the time to? You're right. When you really start looking at timber, you remember almost every tree. That's a really interesting thought and exercise, because it's like, oftentimes we just, at least me personally, you walk through it, and if you're not paying attention, it's like, oh yeah, there's a hackberry there, there's a locust there, and you can almost remember all these different things. And that's all free. And the knowledge is very powerful for sure. Where are some good resources for someone to either, like, just some ideas for someone to track down someone that knows, their general timber composition and get a quick crash course to springboard everything?
The best resource I would tell people, there's a number of written resources. You can go out there and, buy some basic books on Amazon, especially that are relevant to your area. You can get, just simply tree identification, start understanding what you have. But then what I like to say is, we talk on shows like this a lot about deer stuff. And, a guy like myself with Whitetail Partners, we're going to go and give you recommendations on your habitat and what to do for the deer. But talking with your state and private foresters in the area, especially if you think there might be a timber harvest at hand, or maybe there's a government program that you want to take advantage of for your situation, getting all of the background on that. When you invite those people out to your property, you're going to learn a ton, not just about the deer aspect with a guy like me, but understanding the future potential for timber sale, maybe invasive species. You're going to get into all these things of, the health of your timber. And I think in doing so, you're going to quickly educate yourself and have a much better idea. I think it's pretty reckless and dangerous for you to go out there and just start cutting trees, not knowing what it is, where it is, what season is it, should I even be cutting this tree at this time of year, and a number of other things and pitfalls that people can get into. So learn by reading and hiring some of those professionals. And I say hire, but a lot of those government and private foresters, they're going to come to your ground for free as a part of their service that they do. So reach out to them, because walking timber with different professionals is going to help you a lot.
It's one of my favorite things to do, is walk timber with different timber experts, because you learn something every single time to some degree. So Well, no, I think that's great. I think that's a good punch list for people to start, and no matter where you're at, based off that information for today, there's likely room for improvement no matter who you are. So, is it with it being May right now, is there much that people could implement right now for the next 2 months?
Yeah. So, again, talking about timber and all that, what I do say is much of your timber cutting is done before green up. So that window's closed now for just about everybody. And, the big impact, the heavier cuts, the stuff we started with in our conversation on the logging and all that, that is going to wait till next season. However, some of the things you can be doing is more of these, what I would call micro improvements of making sure that entry point on a corridor, that entry point to the hunting location, maybe you got a mock scrape set up or something like that, making sure that that's dialed in. So if you're gonna fall a few trees right adjacent to the stand, you're gonna maybe work on some hinge cuts to funnel deer into the location that you're looking to have that opportunity. That can happen right up until hunting season. You want to be mindful of tree species and disease and some of these things that you want to be cautious of, but at the same point in time, most of these smaller trees that you're working with, I would say that you're going to be in good shape to go out there and make sure that those hunting setups are good. I'm done cutting heavy timber for the year, but we're going to be getting into smaller stuff all throughout the summer here as we're developing properties.
Is now a good time to potentially track down a consulting forester with it likely less logging jobs going on too across the country?
Yeah, that's a great point to make. During that winter season, those guys are running like crazy trying to manage timber sales and getting their work done. They have they can do logging at different times of the years depending on what the project is, but most of that work happens throughout the winter, so you're going to find that those guys are generally a little more relaxed and available, and they should always be interested in helping you out because that's just what they do.
I like it, Sam. Where can people track you down if they have specific questions and you're part of the neck of the woods or anywhere else?
Yeah, well, thanks, Jake. Just a plug here for Whitetail Partners. You find us at whitetailpartners.com or just Google Whitetail Partners. You'll find us on the top of that search page. And we have 10 consultants across the country willing to help you and insert whatever we can in terms of planning, land management, and all the things to get you going on your property.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Sam.
Appreciate it, Jake. Thanks.
All right, there you guys have it. I hope you guys enjoyed this episode of Back 40. A handful of really good projects here that can help you, that are affordable. Some of them might even put a little money in your pocket. And these are just 4 ideas. And I think right now is a great time of year to think on the past year. What can I do now? What can I do in June? What can I do in July, August, or September leading up to the season to have the most potential success? It's easy to push things off. It's easy to say, it'll be okay. But remember last year, think of where you were at in October and November, saying this has to get done, this has to get done. Make sure to carve out the time if you can and get some basic projects done that's going to help you this upcoming fall, and you're going to thank yourself. We will see you next time. See ya.